Yes, it's Planet America time. Hi, I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Ciadello.
This week, New Hampshire produces another nail-biter.
This victory here is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump.
They're feeling the burn, but can Democrats stand the heat?
32 candidates. He topped the field. I think that's good no matter what his percentage was.
Also this week, what difference do debates make?
And is Trump's blue-collar boom for realsies? But first...
Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont has won the first in the nation New Hampshire primary, ahead of former Mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, and a fast-finishing Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota.
We're going to Nevada. We're going to South Carolina. We're going to win those states as well.
Vote blue no matter who. We are on the same team.
I cannot wait to win the nomination.
And here's how it played out. Bernie Sanders kept his nose just in front of Pete Buttigieg, then Klobuchar. Way back, a disappointing, even devastating night for both Elizabeth Warren, who is from neighbouring Massachusetts, and former Vice President Joe Biden, who left New Hampshire early and headed to South Carolina, where he tried to rally his beleaguered supporters.
It ain't over, man. We're just getting started.
Yeah, Biden isn't doing so well in the primaries, although he's doing a lot better as a pundit. This was how he kicked off Friday's debate.
I took a hit in Iowa, and I'll probably take a hit here.
Yeah, he wasn't wrong, though.
That is true.
Yeah.
But you can understand why Biden would have been pessimistic. I mean, Number Crunchers 538 looked at the demographics of all the 50 states, and they found that Iowa and New Hampshire were Biden's 41st and 46th most winnable states, respectively, whereas the next two states coming up are Biden's 30th and 6th most winnable states. The question is, can Biden get there in one piece, or is he damaged goods?
Very good question. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Warren is vowing to stay in the race, finding solace in Amy Klobuchar's showing.
And I also want to congratulate my friend and colleague, Amy Klobuchar, for showing just how wrong the pundits can be when they count a woman out.
Tulsi Gabbard's also a woman, Elizabeth. Now, let's go to the exit polls, because they explained a lot. Firstly, Joe Biden. For the last 6 months, it's basically been Biden winning older voters, Sanders winning younger voters. At one point, Biden was winning 2/3 of the over 65s. But today, Klobuchar won the over 65s with 32%. Then you got Mayor Pete. Sanders won 16% of the over 65s, even though he only won 4% of the over 65s in Iowa. And Biden is back there on only 10%. Biden lost his base. Similarly, the moderate vote. Once again, no surprise, Buttigieg and Klobuchar won most of the moderates. But big surprise, Sanders won more moderates than Biden did. Biden is in trouble. Okay, what about with Elizabeth Warren? Well, she had her own mini disaster as well, obviously. Throughout this race, her and Mayor Pete have been fighting for the white college graduate vote, right? Now, in New Hampshire, white college graduates make up about half the Democrats. But Amy Klobuchar went and ate Warren's lunch with 27% of white college graduates. And that is the reason that Warren fails. And I got one more exit poll for you here, John, and this one could be a little bit worrying for Democrats. This is a poll of which candidate supporters say they might not vote for the Democratic nominee, depending on who it is. Now, you might think that would mostly be Sanders supporters, wouldn't you? They might not support the Democratic nominee because they're disaffected independents.
That's their reputation.
Exactly, it's a cliche. And it's true that 24% of the people who said they wouldn't support a Democratic nominee, maybe, were Sanders supporters.
Right.
But 25% of them were Buttigieg supporters, and Klobuchar supporters weren't far behind either. And by the way, that was 16% of voters who said they might not vote for the Democrat. What that's all telling me is that the antipathy in the Democratic Party is not just coming from Sanders supporters, it is going both ways, possibly even more from the moderates, which means if this primary starts to drag on, it could start to get really ugly.
Yeah, it could indeed. The signs pointing towards this result today were certainly there. In the week between Iowa and New Hampshire, there was significant movement in the polls as the mangled results from Iowa last week began to sink in. Sanders was already leading in New Hampshire, and he ticked up more than 3 points over the week. Pete Buttigieg surged over 8 points before easing back over the weekend. Amy Klobuchar, the other bolter, leapfrogging Biden and Warren with a 4.5-point gain. Warren slipping, and Joe Biden, the biggest loser, crashing over 6.5 points in the week. And we should also note as well, Chaz, that businessman Andrew Yang, who has run a surprisingly strong campaign built around his plan for a $1,000 a month universal basic income, has called it quits this afternoon. So we better dust off our favourite board game.
Guess who won't be president?
Yes, Andrew Yang, the happy warrior on the trail, outlasted lots of better fancied rivals. He was getting less than 3% support when he called it quits this afternoon, saying he couldn't keep taking donations if he had no chance of winning.
Yes, Yang was cruising along smoothly, making lots of friends, having a great time, but then not so much.
Happy metaphor. The Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado has also announced the end of his campaign today. There he goes. Michael Bennet sounded the alarm over the party going too far to the left on things like Medicare for all. He won less than 1/3 of 1 percentage point of the vote today.
Although there was a silver lining for Michael Bennet.
This is the most popular tweet that I've sent out as a candidate for president. If you elect me president, I promise you won't have to think about me for 2 weeks at a time.
Promises made, promises kept, John.
Yeah.
They didn't have to vote for it.
Former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, meanwhile, has indicated he may well be next out the door. A super PAC spent $1.8 million in New Hampshire on ads on his behalf. Well, Deval Patrick got less than 0.5% of the vote today. Patrick says he'll be taking time tomorrow to talk with his family and then make a decision. Not usually the kind of thing that somebody says when they're about to announce they're staying in the race for the long haul. Well, for more, we're joined by former Democratic presidential candidate Dennis Kucinich, who's with us once again from Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome back to Planet America, Dennis.
Good to be with you.
A win for Bernie Sanders, maybe not by as much as the polls had suggested. How did you read today's result in New Hampshire?
32 candidates. He topped the field. I think that's good no matter what his percentage was. And he won New Hampshire last time. He won it again. That'll give him a little bit of a tailwind going into the next primaries and caucuses.
Dennis, Sanders is winning contests. You can't do more than that. But at the same time, he's been talking about bringing in new voters, and he doesn't seem to be bringing in as many new voters as he'd like. Why do you think that is?
Well, look, as a matter of fact, I mean, young people are very enthusiastic. They drive the emotion of a campaign, and sometimes they don't vote, and that's a problem. But right now, I think he has to be considered the front runner. And you know, he has a nationwide organization that no one can meet or match. At
least so far, at least in the first two states, his major competition seems to be Pete Buttigieg, who the online left there's no finer way to put it, they detest him. I'm just wondering what your view is, Dennis, of Pete Buttigieg as this contest has developed.
Well, I think, you know, it's remarkable to see him emerge as a formidable candidate. At the same time, I think that the buzz that's out there is that he may have trouble with a traditional constituency of the Democratic Party in the African-American community. So we'll see how he does in South Carolina. If he can post the same kind of showing in South Carolina that he did in Iowa and in New Hampshire, he's going to be a serious contender all the way through the election.
The other big surprise to this point, Dennis, seems to be the really poor showing of former Vice President Joe Biden, a couple of fifth-place finishes. Can he regroup and with a strong showing in Nevada and South Carolina, can he save his campaign, or is this a dead man walking?
No, I mean, far from being a dead man walking. I mean, Joe Biden is still someone who has a lot of support, particularly among African Americans, based on the fact that he was Barack Obama's vice president. So we'll see. You know, I think that all of us are surprised that he hadn't done better. But I'll tell you why I think he hasn't done better. I think that the Democratic Party here made a mistake when they went after Trump on Ukraine, because that was immediately going to pull the other side of the story in, which was Biden's son. And that's the prime reason why Biden's candidacy has been weakened, that the minute the Democrats attacked Trump on Ukraine, the argument reflected back on the Bidens. That has not helped Joe Biden at all. It's probably hurt his candidacy considerably.
A week ago, after Amy Klobuchar finished below Joe Biden in Iowa, nobody was expecting her to get 20% in New Hampshire. How do you explain her surge, and could it last?
people were looking for an alternative. I mean, they weren't, you know, there's a number of people who were not satisfied with the field. It's probably going to be about 1/5, which means that there's still voters up for grabs who haven't decided. She impressed people with the debate performance, and that has registered in her results in New Hampshire today. How that will play out down the road remains to be seen.
Dennis, it is customary after Iowa and New Hampshire, the fear tends to grip Democrats. They look at their field and say, there's nobody here that can win. Sometimes they're right. This year, are they right, or is there reason for some reassurance?
Hope springs eternal.
Dennis, great to have you with us again. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
The final chance that many New Hampshireites had of seeing the leading Democratic candidates before today's primary was in last Friday night's debate at St Anselm College in Manchester. But with everything else going on, all the retail politicking, the millions of dollars worth of ads online and on TV, do these debates make any difference? Over the years, there have been some pretty memorable moments in primary debates. Like the time in 1980 when Republican Ronald Reagan got shirty with a moderator who tried to shut off his microphone in a debate the Reagan campaign had bankrolled.
Would the sound man please turn Mr. Reagan's mic off for a minute? I am paying for this microphone, Mr. Speaker.
And in 1992, when Democrat Jerry Brown accused the Clintons of being corrupt.
He is funneling money to his wife's law firm for state business. That's number one.
I don't care what you say about me, but you ought to be ashamed of yourself for jumping on my wife. You're not worth being on the same platform.
I'll tell you something, Mr.
And then, of course, there are the awkward gaffes.
The third agency of government, yeah. I would do away with the education, commerce, and let's see, I can't. The third one I can't. Sorry. Oops.
Speaking of awkward, there was also the time in 2008 when Hillary Clinton was asked why voters found Barack Obama more likeable.
He's very likable. I agree with that. I don't think I'm that bad.
You're likable enough.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
It turns out likability and the way candidates interact on stage really makes a difference.
I agree with that completely.
According to one study, 60% of participants changed their mind about which candidate to support after watching a primary debate. And there's evidence the debates in this campaign have had an impact too.
The evidence is overwhelming.
The first debate of the 2020 election cycle was way back in June last year. And there were so many candidates they didn't fit on one stage. In fact, they didn't fit on two stages. And it was in the second of those twin talkfests where frontrunner Joe Biden was on the receiving end of one of the more memorable moments of the campaign. Kamala Harris criticised Biden's opposition to the policy of busing students to desegregate schools in the 1970s.
There was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
The headlines were not kind to Biden. The frontrunner had tripped in the first 2020 Democratic debate. Biden, they said, failed to cement his place as the favourite to win the nomination, giving a wider opening to a small pack of legitimate rivals.
It's just wrong, simply wrong.
Heading into that debate, Harris was in fourth place on 7% nationally. Biden was at 32%. A week later, Harris was coming second on 15%, and Biden had crashed 6 points. And that was consistent with research that found that first impressions really matter.
I couldn't agree more.
In early primary debates, the public tends to learn more about candidates with whom they are relatively unfamiliar. And that could certainly describe Kamala Harris at the time. In subsequent debates, Harris pulled her punches and came under attack herself from the likes of Tulsi Gabbard.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
Those criticisms of Harris's record as a prosecutor and attorney general in California saw her poll numbers dive, and by December, she was out of the race. Other candidates, including Warren and Buttigieg, have spiked in the polls on the back of strong debate showings and also then fallen back. Some candidates have suffered from being largely absent from the debate stage, like Steve Bullock and more recently Cory Booker and Julian Castro. And is Deval Patrick even running? The exception, of course, is Mike Bloomberg, who hasn't needed the free airtime afforded by the debates. He's spent a few $100 million buying his own airtime with nobody standing next to him to argue. And according to today's exit polls, 32% of voters said the last debate was an important factor in their decision. 16% said it was the most important factor in their decision. Another clue as to why Klobuchar surged so late. She did well in that debate. The chaos following last week's Iowa caucuses still hasn't been fully resolved, with both the Buttigieg and Sanders campaigns calling for a partial re-canvassing of votes. There has been a lot of pressure on Iowa Democratic Party Chairman Troy Price to explain exactly what went wrong.
Precinct chair and the precinct secretary.
And that pretty well sums up Troy's week, Chaz.
Well, at least no one's going to say the sign was rigged.
Yes.
The Iowa Democrats have released what they say are the final Iowa figures, with Buttigieg just nudging Sanders out for state delegates by 0.1%. Yet somehow being awarded 2 extra national delegates for the convention. Those are the delegates that count. Then you've got Warren winning 8 delegates, Biden winning 6, and Klobuchar being awarded 1 all-important delegate that will qualify her for the next debate. But even as those results were being released, the New York Times was reporting inconsistencies in the data from 1/6 of the state's 1,700 precincts. We're talking errors in recording votes, errors in awarding delegates, errors in entering data. In fact, there was one case where a precinct actually allocated more state delegates than it had to allocate. So not a lot of faith in that result, John.
No, certainly not from Bernie Sanders supporters. But let's have a look at the national impact that those Iowa caucus kind of results had. And they were very real. Here's the average of polls as Iowans went to vote on Monday of last week. But now, here is how the average of national polls was looking as New Hampshire went to vote earlier today. Bernie had jumped into first place despite actually going down fractionally, but driving it was a catastrophic showing for Joe Biden in a Quinnipiac poll. Compared to a Q poll just 2 weeks ago, Biden was down 9 points. Bloomberg was the biggest winner, despite not even being on the ballot in either Iowa or New Hampshire. Bernie and Buttigieg were up 4 in the Q poll. Klobuchar and Warren fell a bit. Biden supporters just completely spooked by his 4th place in Iowa. They all flocked to Bloomberg and, to a lesser extent, Mayor Pete. The same Q poll had all leading Democrats, though, beating President Trump in head-to-head matchups. So it wasn't all gloom and doom for Dems. The best showing came from Mike Bloomberg, though. He has now overtaken Joe Biden as the Democrat who's seen to do the best against Donald Trump.
And this is why. A few weeks ago, the black vote looked like this, with Biden miles ahead on 52 points. But look at the black vote now. Biden's down 25 points to 27, and Bloomberg is up 14 points to 22. The rest are all pretty similar, except for Pete Buttigieg, who skyrocketed from a humiliating 0% black support all the way up to a miserable 4%. Way to go, Pete. But if Bloomberg keeps stealing Biden's black support, that could make Bloomberg a legitimate contender.
Yeah, it certainly could. Well, when it comes to winning over black voters, Mayor Pete certainly has his work cut out for him. He's done well in 90+% white Iowa and New Hampshire. But as we head towards those more diverse states like Nevada in the west and South Carolina, he has got a big problem. And yesterday, if anything, it got even bigger. He was talking to a mostly black audience about the influence of so-called dark money, super PACs that spend anonymously on ads. I think you know where this is going. He dug himself into a bit of a hole.
There are things we can and should do right away that can deal with black money, dark money.
African American money.
I'm always happy to take black money contributions in my campaign.
Trying to dark money-splain his way out of that one didn't help, Pete.
By the way, nicking Biden's black support isn't the only way that Bloomberg is screwing Biden over. Bloomberg's been holding meetings with big political donors and telling them he doesn't want their money and won't accept it, but he does want their personal support, whatever that means. The other candidates are worried that that could discourage donations to them. You reckon? And guess who's got next to no money left and likes collecting off rich people? You guessed it. I should also say, if Bloomberg does become a thing, that is going to be weird. Only this week, Democrats were fretting all about Trump trolling them again, about him potentially running past a second term to a third and fourth term. Well, Bloomberg did that for real. No trolling. He campaigned to change the law so he could serve a third term. And then during his third term, he campaigned to reverse those changes to the law so no one else could serve a third term. And then there were the frequent complaints about Trump not revealing his taxes. But in New York, Bloomberg only allowed reporters the chance to briefly view, but not keep, a redacted version of his taxes. Now, Bloomberg says he'll reveal his taxes this year, but people say a lot of things, John. Bernie Sanders said this.
In September of 2019, before your heart incident, you had said the following about your medical records. Take a listen.
The American people have a right to know whether the person they're going to be voting for president is healthy. And we will certainly release our medical records before the primaries. It'll certainly be before the first votes are cast.
The first votes have already been cast. You did not release your medical records.
You can start releasing medical records and never ends. We have released a substantive part of all of our medical records. We have doctors who have cardiologists who are confirming that I am in good health. I am in good health.
Oh dear. So, to be fair, like the other candidates, Sanders has released a medical letter that says even after his heart attack, his testing performance was rated above average compared to people of the same age, and he is fit to resume vigorous activity without limitation. But, John, still, he promised his medical records. Then he had a heart attack, and now he's failed by his own standards.
In fact, he didn't even bother to meet Trump's own standards, which, as you may recall, was to dictate his own medical letter to this guy, his doctor, the not at all dodgy-looking Dr. Harold Bornstein, who described Trump's test results as, quote, astonishingly excellent, and declaring that he would be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency. So, Bernie Sanders, lift your game.
You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
Professor Langdon, the chief of police would like your assistance.
I'm not sure how much help I'm going to be here this evening.
A lying dog-faced pony soldier.
I'm into something here that I cannot understand. What are you talking about?
Anyway, my time's up.
Now, it's pretty clear at last week's State of the Union that President Trump's hoping to be re-elected on the strength of the economy. And while Democrats do have points to make about wage growth and inequality, the basic economic stats out there are pretty good. Economic growth, it's not exactly blowing the house down, but under Trump, it's been consistent and decent. In 2019, we saw the fewest new jobs created since 2011, and in none of Trump's 3 years have we seen more jobs created than in any of Obama's last 3 years. But those new jobs do add up, and that is why we're seeing historically low unemployment rates overall for black people and for Hispanic people. Yes, the improvement began under Obama, but a record low is a record low, even if Ivanka Trump did create 15 million of those 7 million new jobs.
Ivanka's been a champion. She's now created over 15 million jobs for the people of our country. One of the reasons our unemployment numbers are the best ever.
Okay, I'm teasing, but the results are not a joke. 68% of Americans are satisfied with the economy, compared to 46% when Trump took over. A record 59% of people say they're financially better off than they were a year ago, and Gallup's been collecting those numbers for 45 years. Also, a record 74% of people say they think they'll be financially better off next year. Once again, a massive number. But there is one sector of the economy that Trump takes particular pride in.
This is a blue-collar boom.
Do you mind? We're talking about manufacturing, and the US is a manufacturing powerhouse. It's responsible for 17% of the world's manufacturing output. And yes, that's less than China, but it's more than Japan, Germany, and South Korea combined. So claims like this go down well.
After losing 60,000 factories under the previous two administrations, America has now gained 12,000 new factories under my administration.
And that claim, oh God, you people, excuse me. And that claim from Trump was true, except that growth in manufacturing establishments began not with Trump, but 3 years before Trump. And while that growth in manufacturing establishment has been accelerating recently, it's interesting how Trump calls them factories, because their definition actually includes establishments that make new products by hand or in the worker's home, and that includes bakeries, candy stores, and custom tailors. And you know, that's an important point, because over 8,000 of those 12,000 supposed factories created under Trump employ 5 people or fewer. But who cares? Let's just focus on actual manufacturing output, shall we? And there is no denying that manufacturing production took off big time under Trump. But then something happened and it shrank 1.3% last year. In fact, December was the 5th straight month of contraction, according to the Institute for Supply Management Manufacturing Index, which registered its worst result since 2009. So what's going on there? Well, most people's first guess is the trade war, and it is true. Exports were growing swimmingly from 2016 all the way through to mid-2018 when the trade war started, and since then exports have flatlined. But maybe they could start growing again now that Trump's kind of made up with China and you got that deal going with Canada and Mexico. And yes, I know that the Mexico deal isn't exactly the biggest and best trade agreement in the history of the world, but I mean, sorry? Oh, apparently it is the biggest and best trade agreement in the history of the world. Who knew? But either way, all anyone actually cares about is jobs. Remember this from last year?
We have created 5.3 million new jobs and importantly added 600,000 new manufacturing jobs, something which almost everyone said was impossible to do.
Well, that is, oh God, I get it, you love Trump. Fine, you have a presidential medal of freedom, bugger off. Now, we didn't hear anything about manufacturing jobs this year though, did we? This might be why. Once again, first few years of the Trump administration saw a healthy increase in manufacturing employment, but then it stopped dead. In fact, it's now going backwards, at least for the time being. Weekly hours for blue-collar manufacturing workers, even worse. They've been going backwards for almost 12 months. So does that mean that the blue-collar boom doesn't even exist? Well, not so fast, because I know Trump is fond of manufacturing, but it really isn't as important as it used to be. Manufacturing jobs have dropped from about 35% of total employment back in the 50s to just 8.4% today. And as you can see, they've not done much for the last decade. And as for blue-collar employment, in the late 70s, nearly 30% of employed men with less than a high school diploma worked in manufacturing. But by 2017, less than 15%. So where are all the working class people? They're in services, where the vast majority of new jobs have been created since the 50s. Way more than manufacturing. And yes, it's true those jobs are often not as well paid, but there are a lot of them being created. So maybe it's not the kind of blue-collar boom that Trump wants, but it could still win him an election. And you can applaud that.
When I get trained monkeys,
big, beautiful world.
One of the lessons from last week's Iowa caucuses was, of course, don't use the app. And Nevada Democrats have announced they won't be, but that doesn't mean that they're not looking for ways to mess it up anyway. According to the local Nevada Independent newspaper, the campaigns are frustrated, concerned and nervous. Early voting is due to start this weekend and nobody seems to know how it will work, how the votes will actually flow back to their own home precincts, or how caucus results will be transmitted back to the party. But apart from that, it's all going very, very well.
Don't worry, John, they're not relying on some last-minute phone app. They're apparently going to use a last-minute iPad tool instead. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, the Nevada caucus is on February 22, and that is it for another trip to Planet America.
As always, we'll be having a fireside chat on Friday at 8 p.m. on the news channel, and there is plenty more on iView, Facebook and YouTube. See you later. What the hell, John? What is this?